one thing that I learned was it's not about the outcome, it's who you become in pursuit of the outcome. And that kind of falls in line with something that Mike Tyson has said, which is to be the champion, you have to be the champion before you're the champion. I want to get to 800 pounds. Like 765 is great, but I want to get to 804, 821, right? So what do I need to do? What am I not doing that's stopping me from achieving that? One of the first real rock bottoms of my life was actually when I won. I remember getting back to the hotel after I had done it, and I felt the emptiest I had ever felt. I felt really alone. I felt super cold, super empty. And what's weird is not only did I accomplish it, but my parents were calling me, congratulating me. Like I had people around me who cared.
Gavin, 2-time world record holder in powerlifting. Thank you for joining me on the show today, brother.
I'm grateful to be here, man. Seriously, it's awesome when you get connected through mutuals, because I think that kind of, it almost like pre-qualifies the conversations, you know, that you know that the people you're going to be talking to are good people, because the person who recommended that is good people, you know? So I'm excited to be here, man. I'm really grateful.
Thank you. I just wanted to jump straight into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
What initially sparked your interest in powerlifting?
So it's funny, to this day, I don't love powerlifting. And for the people listening who don't know what powerlifting is, it's a strength sport, right? And in competition, you basically have 9 attempts at one attempt to have a big total. And a total is essentially your best squat, your best bench, and your best deadlift. And there's usually judges, there's referees. In other words, there's standards you have to meet, right? You get 3 squats, 3 bench, and 3 deadlifts. Now, the entire meet will probably run you, if it's moving at a decent pace, 3 hours long. So you're competing for about 3 hours, right? It's a weight class sport, so depending on how competitive you are and how competitive you want to be, you may cut weight, maybe you eat up into a class. Just trying to paint this picture here for what the sport is like versus like the actual training. The actual training is really just about getting super strong. I love the training, and that's why I say all of that. I love the training. I love being strong. I love the grind and the grit that comes with pushing yourself in the gym. There's something just super tangible about that. Powerlifting itself, I don't necessarily love. Like, I don't love the sport. I don't love the game and like all the ins and outs of it. For me, powerlifting became a vehicle to do what I believe I was born to do, which is to be a world champion, to be great. And I don't want to sound like a cocky asshole by saying this, because I truly do believe that, yes, I was born to be great, but I also believe you were too. For me, I needed something. I basically got to a point in my life where I was asking myself, what else is there? Like, I'm tired of being tired, you know, and I was training every day. I got to this point where I was like, what is this for? It's not that I found powerlifting. It's that I rediscovered this purpose that I have, which is to become the absolute best at what I do. Powerlifting happened to be the vehicle I took to get there, if that makes sense. Yeah. So that's like the context to it. But yeah, man, I mean, like the short end of it, the story of it is I had transferred to Colgate University from Manhattan College. And I think I was like a sophomore or junior at the time. I was training for, really at that point, I didn't have any competitions, didn't have any sort of sport that I was training for, but I had just gotten out of training for basically out of an Olympic weightlifting academy in New York. And I had done a ton of different sports growing up, but wasn't doing any mainstream sports in college. And so I kind of just was training just to train, like just enjoying it. Basically mentally hit a wall, man, where I was like, again, what is this for? Like, why am I doing this? Is this all I'm meant to be? And am I just training just to like look good? Like, what is the point of this? And so I just remember, dude, I was just really depressed. I was really down and out. There was a lot of other things going on in my personal life that were just really hard and really heavy. And I got in my car. It was really cold. And I just made a decision I was going to become a world champion, and powerlifting was going to be the vehicle. So that's like the story side of it. But hopefully that gives people like context to the sport as well. Like, I think the sport's great, but yeah, I don't do it for the sport, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One thing you said I want to go back on and touch a little bit more on, because I think a lot of young men, a lot of men in general, a lot of people, not just men, could relate to something you said, which is, I'm tired of being tired. That was a really good quote, just because you said you went through a little bit of mental struggles. Your life was hard at one point, and then you found the vehicle in which to like be persistent and continue fighting through that hardship. Because I could say for myself, I got to a point in my life where I was tired of being tired, and I felt like the walls were caving in on me. And then thankfully I found the vehicle, which is podcasting, and I get to come on here and just talk about my life and just be myself and express myself, and also meet great people like you. So what's it like being in that moment, deciding I'm going to take control of this? Because when when you have that feeling where everything's caving in and life is just coming at you and happening at you, it's very hard for a lot of people to just say, I'm going to make a change. I'm going to do something. I don't know what it is. You luckily found powerlifting and decided, I'm going to go for it. What was that first initial feeling that you had that made you decide, I'm going to go for it and stick with it?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. It is really difficult to make that decision, but I don't think I'm like special for making it. Like I don't have anything. There's nothing about me that's special that allowed me to do that. Truthfully, it was very freeing. I think, and I don't want to speak for everyone. And, I certainly don't want to speak for people who are in this position because, everybody kind of reacts to things differently and responds to things differently. But I felt trapped, so that tired of being tired, basically like, energy is neither created nor destroyed, right? So that energy you have to be something, to do something, that has to go somewhere when you're not being something and doing something, right? And so that energy it just becomes negative and it just weighs you down. It doesn't propel you forward because, again, that energy can't be destroyed. And so I felt super trapped by that. And when I made a decision to commit to something that had a clear path and a clear objective, it felt freeing. And that was what was addictive about it, if that makes sense. And so for me, I think that there's a lot of times, at least in my life, where I've felt trapped by this overwhelming sense of there's got to be more. What else is there for me? The freedom comes when I then decide to commit to something and I don't look back, and you're going all in on that, whatever it may be. And even to today, I still have that feeling in other areas of my life, even with powerlifting, because I've kind of capped out a lot of what can be done in the sport so far. There's still some stuff that I have to do, but in terms of the heights and the levels that you can get to in the sport as a natural athlete, like I've done a lot of it. God, thank God. And so because of that, it's even then it's like, okay, so now what? Where do we go? And so I do think that it's a relentless pursuit, but it can be very freeing when you do commit to that. And so it was almost like an easy step to take, because to me, what was the alternative? Like to just fucking stay there. And again, that feeling of complete exhaustion. And I think that feeling of complete exhaustion, it's not just that you're tired of doing something. You're tired of, it really feels like you're pushing up against something that just won't budge. You're pushing up against a wall that just won't move. And you actually, like, you really are trying. You really do want it to move. You just can't figure out what the fuck you're doing wrong. And for me, as a faith-driven person, someone who's really worked hard to develop my relationship with Christ over the last several years, we would call this like a moment of surrender, right? But even if you're not faith-driven or faith-oriented, it's still a moment where you have to decide, I have to be willing to let go of what is for what could be. And that's basically what it is. So once I made that decision, it was kind of easy. And like I said, it was pretty freeing, but it can be really difficult to figure out like, okay, what am I aiming at to begin with,
Yeah. I wanted to ask, how do you get over those mental hurdles? Because you spoke on it a little bit, but are there any things in specifics? Like when I spoke to Julian and asked him if he's having a hard time in life, he would go on walks. Is there anything you would do? Like, would you pray? Would you say, let's go in the gym and get a good lift? How do you get over that mental hurdle that you might be facing in a moment?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have a really good answer for it because I think I'm still trying to figure that out, how to respond to these situations, especially like as a young man, you're trying to create progress in every area of your life. And sometimes the answer really isn't obvious, I think there is a difference between coping and then like actually solving. And something like, for example, like a coping mechanism for me might be, I'm going to sit by myself outside my house and smoke a cigar, right? Like that, I will think clearly that way, and I might be able to work through these things, but ultimately nothing's actually getting done in those moments. So that's more of like a coping mechanism, right? But in terms of like actual problem solving, one for sure is prayer. Two, and this is, I have to be very careful when I do this because sometimes it actually has the opposite effect, but but reaching out to people who I know want the best for me, who can hold me accountable to what it is that I'm trying to do. And that's not yes men. That's not my best friends. That's not my boys. That's not who I'm talking about. It's the people who I know genuinely want the best for me. And so they're going to tell me like, yeah, Gav, I'm not going to lie to you. You're fucking up there. Like, yes, that is not healthy for you to be doing right now, you know, or here's where I think you went wrong, or that relationship needs to end, you know, things like that. People who are going to speak to me in that way, I will bounce those ideas off of them and bring those problems to them. Why I say that sometimes that has the opposite effect is sometimes that's me just trying to displace responsibility. Be like almost like not that I'm blaming them, but I want them to take care of it and I don't want to handle it. You know what I mean? So I'm very cautious with that. But yeah, so prayer, doing stuff like that. And then truthfully, just trying to take a breath and think about the big picture and think about, again, what is the overarching overall destination we are trying to get to? Where am I in relation to that? And if I were to repeat, and this is how simple it can really get, if I were to repeat my current behaviors and patterns, even as microscopic as my thoughts, right? So everything from thought to action. If I repeated this every single day for the next 5 years, where would I be? Okay, cool. If I'm happy with that, great. We can keep going the way we're going. But if I'm not, what can I change? Even if it's just one thing, what can I change to ultimately change the trajectory? And then see where that would put me 5 years from now. And that's a very easy exercise to do because it's what I would consider to be like microscopic, so to speak, because it's very minute. It's looking at your literal day-to-day actions. You don't have to like conjure up anything that's imaginative. You can like literally look at your day, right? And so if I see things and habits that I'm doing every single day and I'm looking at what that's producing, all I have to do is just kind of think about, okay, well, what changes could I make? And if I need inspiration, that's when I take it to, which is what would be kind of like that fourth thing, looking at people who I can be inspired by, who are where I want to be, and see if I can learn from them. Success tends to leave clues in most regards. So that's what I'd look to. And so I think when I combine those four things, I usually can end up with like a reasonable plan, you know, a reasonable battle plan, if that makes sense.
Definitely. I wanted to touch on, how do you differentiate who you could go to in those type of moments? Because you said you're not going to your best friends, you're not going to yes men. Some people they might see it as, oh, but my best friend's always going to have the best advice for me. And I think it's really important you said that, because that's not always true. They might just be yes men and it's not really helping you out. So how do you differentiate between the people you could go to with these types of problems and the people to stay away from?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm super good at it. I think I'm better than most. I do think God gave me the gift of discernment. Whether or not I trust my discernment is a totally different thing. But there is that gift of discernment, right? Where you kind of can see through people a little bit and know their true intention just based on the energy you get, right? But that is a little voodoo-y. So I think that the best way I can describe it is kind of like in these two ideas. One is unconditional love, right? Which is almost like a near perfect love that you really almost can never truly experience except through Christ. Your parents, if you're lucky, will come close. And I'm very lucky that both my parents, like I come pretty close with that. I don't think there's really much, if anything, that my parents wouldn't do for me or my three younger siblings. So I'm very blessed and very lucky. Not everybody has that. So that would be one thing, is an unconditional love. And what love is, it's not like this coddling, like nurturing thing. It's the truth. Like that's what love is. Love is true. And so if my parents truly love me and they see me going off the rails, if they see me doing something that is self-harming or would harm other people, right? They're going to tell me, and they're going to do everything they can to keep me on track because they love me, even if it hurts me in the short term, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is, there's a quote from Conor McGregor that actually like has really stuck with me ever since I heard it. And he says, I don't eat with people I wouldn't starve with. And whether or not that's true for him, for me, I really try to embody that. Because I know we were talking about this a little bit off camera, but as you grow in any given industry, success tends to attract success. And so other people want to be around you. They see what you're doing. They see how you're moving. And now all of a sudden they give a shit, right? But a lot of this culture is, what have you done for me lately? And that's what I've experienced in powerlifting, in business, in social media, all of it. So a way that I kind of carve off the fat is I want everyone to eat. 100% of zero is still zero. So I have no problem giving away shares, so to speak. But I refuse to truly sit down and dine with and eat with people who would not starve with me. And That's very different than eating with people who bring food to the table, right? Like you can bring food to the table, like you go ahead, eat what you want. But if you're not willing to starve with me, and in return, if I'm not willing to starve with you, I just can't see that as a relationship that I can truly confide in when things get hard, right? And that's kind of how I also, and dude, like, bro, it's a strict standard, man. Like I can count on one hand the number of people who meet that standard. And I'm sure there's like let's say out of all the people that I know who I would consider to be friends, maybe 0.001% of them, I can be that for them. You know, so it does work in reverse too. It's not just like, well, everybody else needs to be able to, you know, grind with me and stuff like that. I need to be able to do that with them. And there's a lot of people I can't say I would be able to do that with, you know? And so, those are probably the two things that I use subconsciously to kind of vet the person that I'm going to go to when I need to lean on, you know, for something.
Definitely. One thing you said that I could definitely relate to, which is funny hearing, because I feel like we all go through this at one point or another in our lives. You said the unconditional love, that your parents might be doing something in the moment. You might hate them for, like, why are you doing this for me? But you don't see what their purpose is in the end. Like, they're just looking out for you. They just want the best. Like, somebody might be looking at it as like, my parents almost is a hater. You know what I mean? They don't see what I'm doing, but you don't understand that in the end of the day, they're really looking out for you and they truly do love you. Like you said, not everybody has that in their life. I'm also lucky to have two parents that truly do love me. And I've gone through so many times where I'm like, why the heck are they telling me to do this or that? They don't see the vision, whatever it was. But honestly, it was me that didn't see the vision. They've known me my whole life and they've been able to like see me grow as a person. And then they've also seen me go down the wrong path sometimes. And then maybe we're not able to see that in ourselves, and having people like that in your life is super important because it just keeps you going down the right path.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a great point too, because it's hard, you know, like just because you are open to, let's say, what your parents might say, doesn't mean you have to follow it at a certain age, right? Like once you're a full-fledged adult and you make your own choices, you do have the ability to be receptive, to be open, but not be controlled by these people, right? And so what happens is you have a filter, you know? And so it's just a matter of like, how dense is this filter I'm going to apply? That's basically it, you know? And again, like if some stranger down the road gives me some sort of criticism, I'm still going to be open to it and listen to it, but I'm going to filter the fuck out of it.
Yeah.
Whereas if my parents give me the criticism, I'm going to filter it a lot less, because I know where it's coming from. The source is literally different, right? And so that's really what I'm getting at. It's not necessarily that like, okay, well, if the people who you believe love you unconditionally say something to you, like you need to just listen to them and that's it. It's not necessarily the case, because we're all imperfect. We all have flaws and we all may be wrong when we judge something or have an opinion on something. But I just think that let's say like the density of the filter should change based on the quality of the source, you know?
I could completely agree with that, because one thing I heard recently, and then now being more in content, is just, why would I listen to somebody who's not in the position I want to be in, you know? And that's more referring to anybody who has negative or even positive. I look for feedback a lot of the times, and then sometimes I look for feedback from my friends, and they tell me something. And when I'm listening to what they're telling me, it's like, wait, why am I even looking for feedback with you? You have yet to start any content. You're giving me feedback on what you think would do great. But if you haven't posted a video, you have no idea what will do well on the internet. Because sometimes my friends will hit me up and be like, oh, you should have done this in this clip. You should have done that. But I'm like, you've never posted a clip on anything in your entire life, and for some reason you think that one change or whatever you're telling me is going to take my clip from 500 views to 500,000. So like you said, I like to think about it, take everything with a grain of salt. It's just how much salt am I going to take in when you're telling me something?
Yeah. What I will say though, to like your friend's credit, is if it's coming from a genuine place, someone genuinely wants to help, and so the advice is honest, then there's a chance that it's really worth listening to, right? Because they just want to see you succeed. They just want to see you grow. And you really never know. Like, they could be totally right, you know? And the thing that always like kind of pissed me off, like I grew up with a lot of different, you know, again, I used to play mainstream sports. So like football, swimming, I did some fighting stuff and like polo. Every single sport I ever played had a coach that would say, I've been doing this for 30 years, blah, blah. To me, it's like, you could have been doing it for 30 years wrong. You know what I mean? Like, so to me, it's not necessarily that just because somebody has experience through something that they are always going to be correct or more correct than others. I do think you need to have the ability to be challenged.
Yeah.
What I think is special, though, is, again, that authenticity of the advice. And I do think it should be rooted in some degree of evidence, right? So if somebody comes to you, if it's your friends and they genuinely want the best for you, and they're like, yo, dude, you should have done this differently in your content. Okay, cool. Like, I love that. Why? What do you think would have changed? And then how would you recommend moving forward with this? Like, how am I going to implement this, right? Would you mind helping me with that? And usually that's kind of like where it stops. But yeah, I mean, it is tough though, because like I said, if you listen to everything and everyone, it becomes an issue, you know? And I do think it's a balance. Like everything in life, like there kind of tends to be this balance where you need to be very firm in your vision and in your direction and what you believe to be true. And I do believe that as long as you are aligned and your intention is good, right? Then you can succeed there. Like that's a good thing. You can stay true to that. The problem happens when you start taking in all the noise and your own voice becomes drowned out because you're listening to all these other things. And that happened to me during my powerlifting career a lot. Like, you know, especially as a kid, you don't really trust yourself as much. And all these people who are supposed to know so much more than you and are more decorated and all this bullshit, they're telling you what you should do, what you shouldn't do, all this stuff. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah. And you end up making all these mistakes. There's nothing wrong with making mistakes. The problem comes in when they're not your own. And then you start to realize like, fuck, man, like if I only trusted myself more in that particular instance, maybe I could have won. Or if I only trusted myself there, maybe I wouldn't have been burned by that company. Or, you know what I mean? And so that's when it becomes dangerous. So as long as you are operating with a sense of confidence and trust in your own direction, your own alignment, then take in all the advice you want, because it's going to get properly filtered. What you don't want is somebody else's opinion to overtake your own simply for the sake of you not trusting your own enough, you know? And that's when I think you'll have a healthy relationship with, like, whether it's your friends or even content strategists or anybody who gets paid to do this and stuff. Like, you will have a healthy relationship with that stuff when you have a healthy relationship with yourself. And every healthy relationship starts with trust.
I love that you said that, because that's something I had to improve on in the past. It's been over a year now, but I just had to sit back and improve the relationship I had with myself. I realized there was a point where it felt like at that moment I didn't love myself, whether it was because I wasn't going to the gym, because I wasn't doing this or that, right? But I had to take a step back and realize the energy I was putting out into the world was getting spread out to so many people, and I was focused about others' lives way more than I was focused about myself. And the second I was able to sit down just by myself, look in the mirror and say, all right, we got to change this. We got to fall back in love with ourselves, and we got to be selfish. Like, it was something that I thought being selfish was a bad thing. But you need to realize, in order to help others, in order to change other people's lives, because I tell my friends all the time, there's two specific buddies, we always talk about it, but in the future, like, what I aim to be is just a pillar. And everybody around me, like, I want them to look at me as like a pillar of hope, of success, of whatever, just anything good, in the sense of, like, I go to the gym 5 times a week because I know it's hard to go to the gym, because I know it's not easy, but I want my parents to go to the gym. But how can I be on my parents' butt? Hey, go to the gym, work out, if I'm not even going? You know what I mean? I read a ton of books now because when I have children, I want them to be excited to learn, excited to take in knowledge. And how could I be telling my kids, hey, you got to learn when daddy's watching TV for 5 hours, never reading a book? So those are things I just had to pick up and start improving on, because one thing I also speak about in a few other episodes is bad habits only increase over time. And it was one thing you spoke about earlier, which was really cool, is like, if you want to be successful, those habits are kind of in a successful person's path where you could learn from them, and you could maybe take up those own habits yourself and just implement them in your life. Because one thing I've seen just through my entire life is once you're older, once you're 30, 35, 40, 45, whatever age it is, and more responsibilities start to build up in your life, it gets harder and harder to get out of those bad habits. So it's one thing I tried to change over this past year with myself, and hopefully in the future I can just continue on the right path.
Do you have like a system that you've implemented to make sure that you are being aware enough of your, let's say, quote unquote bad habits, and B, you're able to like sustainably implement new good habits? Do you have like a way of doing that? Have you found something that works for you?
I haven't found a way to implement new habits, and it's actually something I'm going through right now, because I find myself lacking motivation a ton, and that's where I just fall back on discipline. Like we spoke about it before the camera started. I have no motivation to go to the gym or like hit new PRs and do certain stuff. But in that, I realize I need to step it up. And that's where recently I started journaling, and that's been helping just get my thoughts together. And one thing to address my bad habits is every week and every month, I'll write down the things I'm doing bad and then how they're affecting my life. And then I'll write down the things I'm doing good and how they're affecting my life. And I'll be able to look at it from almost a third person perspective and say, okay, do you want to continue down this road where these bad habits aren't adding anything valuable in my life? Or do we want to go down this road where I could continue doing good habits, take away these bad habits, and just continue adding value? Because one thing I understand, especially with building the studio, building my own body in the gym, building my health, I realize like stuff doesn't happen overnight, and it's okay to not be perfect off day one. Like I understand the bad habits just aren't going to disappear, but I need to be making a conscious effort to attack those bad habits and make them dissipate over time. Like, let's say my bad habits are eating ice cream every week, eating ice cream every day. Like maybe I could just slowly cut it down until that slowly gets out of my life and I don't have the habit of anymore. Like, oh, I need the ice cream to feel good. I need this to feel good. I just try to convert it into a good habit. Anytime I feel like I need to eat ice cream, let me go walk my dog. Let me go get some exercise. Let me step out the house. But I'm definitely still in the stage where I need to implement systems in my life to start and continue to build good habits, because I feel like last year I went through this whole overhaul and just massive change, and now I'm finding myself back into where I feel a little bit stuck, but thankfully due to the good habits I built in the past year, it's nowhere near as like suffocating as I felt last year.
Yeah, well, and you know what too, like I think you hit it on the head, man. I think when you do put in those systems though, you'll get to a point where you can also analyze outcomes and make changes based on data. You know, so like it sounds kind of weird to think of your life like that, but that's kind of like what happens. You know, it's like I read this book, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's a super popular book basically on this, about implementing systems into your life. And one of the things he says is like inputs equal outputs. It's that simple, right? Yeah. And it simplifies everything to a point where it makes it very digestible and manageable. You know, so one of the cool things is like, let's take training, for example. I think you would definitely benefit from having some sort of like legitimate structure to your training. So an actual plan where you don't have to think about anything. You just go in, you do what you have to do, and then you get out. The cool thing about that is any sort of progress you make, big or small, can be measured. And then you can make changes to your training based on those outcomes in relation to what you're trying to accomplish, right? And so what's cool about that is, again, not only do you have a system, it's no longer about motivation. It's purely just let me go do what's on the menu. Let me go do what I have to do. That's it. And then the plus side to that too is I can also look back and measure what worked and what didn't, so I can make changes moving forward. Whereas if you don't have that system in place and you don't have any way of measuring what's going on, you kind of always end up in this like aimless loop in a way, and you're just not aware of everything. Same thing happens in finance. Like once you start working with a spreadsheet and you're budgeting everything and you're looking at your inflows and your outflows and you're looking at your costs and your expenses, how much cash is coming in, where it's coming from, you start looking at everything and it's like, oh, okay, this makes sense now. Let me see where there's a leak in the funnel or a leak in the pipeline, so to speak. And it's the same thing I think for every single area. I just think it's harder to do with stuff that's more mental, if that makes sense, more intangible, like business stuff, especially stuff like this. It's a little bit harder because like, what does it mean to write up a program for scaling up your podcast, right? Like what does that actually look like? You know, whereas for your training, there's a lot of data out there already, and it's your body, so you can feel it, you can feel the results, you can see that, you know what I mean? So sometimes it's tricky, but I think, dude, like you're on the right track for sure. And I appreciate that too, because that reminds me that I definitely need to amplify my own systems when it comes to creating some sort of progress. Cause I definitely feel a little stuck right now too. It's tough, man. I think it's a tough journey, and like the entrepreneurial route especially, there's no rule book, you know, which is good and bad. Like the bad thing is that there's no rule book, but the good thing is that anybody can do it, you know? So it's not a profession for a reason. And I think that that's the beauty of it. Downside is if you can't figure it out, if you can't stay disciplined, if you can't create a good system and structure for yourself, it's going to become very difficult to be successful in it.
Yeah. And one thing I want to reiterate, which is really cool, is having conversations like this has helped me a ton. Just being able to vocalize, like, instead of, because one thing you might have found on your entrepreneurship journey is, or one thing I found is, it's lonely, man. Honestly, you're by yourself a lot of the time, regardless if you have a girlfriend, if you have family caring about you. You need to hunker down and work on your own and focus on your own future a lot of the time. So that time stuck in your own head might be good or bad. So having conversations like this, being able to say it out loud, being able to bounce off ideas has been really cool for me. And just one of the many reasons I really enjoy podcasting, because I get to hear insight from you. And then it's just so funny because half the people I sit down with, I'm always laughing because I could relate so much to what they're saying.
Yeah. Well, and one thing too that I've discovered that, like, I have an ADD, ADHD brain, right? So like I need structure in my life. Otherwise I'm all over the fucking place. So for me, one thing that I've found that's really helpful, because you are alone a lot, you are in your own head a lot. And a lot of times you don't really know what to do next, and you're overwhelmed by how much you have to do, period. So one thing that's really helped me is I kind of learned a little bit from traders. Like, I don't really trade stocks. I have friends who trade full time and make stupid money doing it, right? Genius guys. The best trading tactics, the best trading strategy, all of it, they would say it comes down to rules. So what they do is they come up with their like trading strategy, and it's really just a set of rules that they follow, you know? And so once they see a certain pattern, or once they see a stock hit a certain, whatever the lingo is, they buy, sell, short, you know, whatever. And so they execute based on a rule set. When you apply that to your own life, it becomes very easy to become more effective and more efficient. And that's something that I've really tried to do. So especially like in my training, right? It's very easy, and this kind of happens subconsciously, to create rules for myself, right? If, then, when, those types of things. But if you can do that, that's what kind of like propels you forward, even though you are kind of on your own, you know, because you've created these boundaries now for yourself that allow you to operate. And when you do it, they're not restrictions, they're just guardrails. And so again, they keep you moving forward, and no different than like bowling with guardrails. Like, at the end of the day, bro, if you throw the bowling ball and it's going way out to the left, it'll never reach the pins. But if you just put up those guardrails, even if it goes slow, and even if it hits the guardrails a couple times while it gets there, at least it'll still get there. And so the rules really do help. So creating like these boundaries or these rules for yourself to make sure that no matter what, you kind of keep moving forward, and it helps you make decisions faster, helps you be more calculated, you know, you don't second guess yourself as much. Like a good example of this too is I think, I don't know if it was Jeff Bezos who said this, but long story short, it was something along the lines of, we make decisions fast and we worry about making the right decision after we've made it, basically. Like, or no, that's what it is. It's, we don't worry about making the right decision. We worry about making the decision right. So I think that that's really unique. You know, I'm not saying that that's the best way to think about it, but Jeff Bezos is pretty successful, so maybe it works. But you get what I'm trying to say, right? So that's a rule. So he came up with this rule that was now embedded in the Amazon culture that allows him to move forward. So as opposed to sitting there for 15 days trying to solve one specific problem, the team is like, we've got 15 minutes. Let's make the best decision, and then let's try and make that decision we made the best, you know? So having these rules in your life kind of really do help, but it takes time to develop them. Like, I'm still definitely working on it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because that goes back to it was actually a conversation I had with Jimmy. The way I thought of that was, now I post my videos when I think they're 60% ready, because if I wait for it to be perfect, it's going to take me 15 weeks for it to be perfect. There's something I spoke to you about even before the cameras turned on was my first podcast that I had on here was off one camera, and it just looked so hectic. And I genuinely didn't want to post it. Like, I texted the two guys that were on the show, and I was like, you know what? This is terrible. I can't post it. I need it to be perfect. They're like, dude, it's your first episode. Nobody cares. You care 10 times more than everybody else. Like, just relax. Put it out there. Like, it's going to be fine. And it's so funny because even off my first episode, people are like, oh my gosh, you did a great job. And even till today, I think I do a shit job. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, we're our own worst enemies when it comes to criticizing ourselves. But it's just so funny being able to look back on stuff like that and just being able to grow in general.
Yeah, it's a constant process. And I think that's the goal. Like, one of the things that I found and I learned from competing and kind of getting to the top and then missing it all by a matter of inches and then falling all the way back down, then having to get right back to the top and do it all over again, constantly met with this adversity, we'll call it. One thing that I learned was it's not about the outcome, it's who you become in pursuit of the outcome. And that kind of falls in line with something that Mike Tyson has said, which is to be the champion, you have to be the champion before you're the champion, right?
Yeah.
And that's just really true, you know? Like, you really do have to assume the traits, the behaviors, the actions, the thoughts, all of it that are of what it is you are trying to be, if that makes sense. And when you do it that way, it's no longer about the outcome because you don't really care about that. It's who you're becoming in pursuit of it. And so by nature, you will achieve what it is you've set out to because you're becoming the person, I'm going to use the word worthy of it, but that may not be the best word, but you get what I'm saying. And so that kind of falls in line with everything, you know, I think you were just talking about.
Yeah. And what you just said also reminds me, I think it was Higher Up Wellness. He spoke about imposter syndrome. Like, how do you get away from imposter syndrome? And he said something that was pretty cool. And once you have enough evidence of you are that person, you know what I mean? The person you want to become, the person you believe you're going to become. Once you have enough evidence to back it, like once you're in the gym enough days and you're staying on your regime and you're lifting the weights you want to, you see that the imposter syndrome goes away.
Yeah. Well, and I do think a healthy amount of imposter syndrome is actually really good too, though.
Yeah.
Like, because it keeps you grounded and it makes sure that you're always going to be willing and ready to learn. You know, like when I talk about, let's say, how to build squat strength, like I'm a world record squat holder, right? So I've broken the record multiple times. I've competed multiple times against some of the best athletes in the world to get this record. And it's 765 pounds in the 93 kilo class as a natural athlete. And so I'm not saying that to gloat or anything like that. What I'm trying to say though is I've also missed it a ton. And what I've recognized is I want to get to 800 pounds. Like 765 is great, but I want to get to 804, 821, right? So what do I need to do? What am I not doing that's stopping me from achieving that? And what does he know or what does she know that I could benefit from? You don't have that mindset unless you kind of go into it with a little bit of like, shit, you know what? There might be some stuff I don't totally have figured out here. Even something as granular as technique. Like there's a lot of people who would consider me a pretty good squatter, but I can pick apart every single squat I've ever done and show you more inefficiencies and inadequacies than I can show you the opposite, you know? So the way I see my squats is like, I don't really think I'm that great of a squatter, you know? And to everybody else, they may be like, oh, you're crazy. Like, you know, but I see the truth, you know what I mean? And so it's this balance of, again, like recognize, I completely agree with what you said, Higher Up Wellness said, recognize like you have evidence. So why not operate from the truth? And this is actually something that I talk about. This is something that I talk about in one of the mindset ebooks that I wrote a long time ago, where I was basically having a conversation with a client who was competing, and he would get super, super nervous, and he wouldn't know if he was capable of a certain number. And so he would shy away from putting in that number. In powerlifting, you basically have to tell the ref table essentially like what you're going to take next, right? And you can only go up or stay the same. You can never go back down. So he was concerned that he couldn't hit, I think the number was like 551 or something like that on squat. And I was like, dude, you've hit X number like 10 times in the gym prior. You absolutely have the strength to do it. So instead of allowing the fear to lie to you, the enemy to work in you, instead use the truth to battle against it. And that, like, not to get all faithy, but that's what Christ tells us to do as well, right? Which is pretty incredible. But you use the truth to battle against it. And the truth is, I've done this. I am ready. Everything I need is already within me. And so that's going back to the higher up wellness thing. You're using the truth to battle against the bullshit, against the lies, right? And so the truth is, yes, dude, you, according to history, according to what you have done, you are this person. There's no denying that. In fact, you would need more evidence to prove that you aren't if you try to, because you have so much evidence proving that you are. And so I think that is really, really important and really, really true. It can be really difficult in our culture to be mindful of it, because we are so concerned about being correct and not being ridiculed and not being wrong and stuff like that. But again, like, I also think that there is a healthy side to being cautious with it, because you don't want to spread misinformation, number one. Number two, you always want to be willing and able to learn, and so I think like having a little bit of like, shit, like, is this the right thing, right? That kind of keeps you on your toes a little bit.
I wanted to ask you, how do you pursue the balance of pursuing raw strength and making sure you have the necessary form to continue growing in powerlifting?
Yeah, so strength, there's a couple different things when it comes to strength training that people, it happens naturally, but people tend to overlook. And the more elite you become, the more you have to worry about that. So strength to most people is just simply getting strong. So getting your muscle tissue to be able to lift X amount of weight for, let's say, X amount of reps in a certain movement. And that's really key, because the next level to strength is skill. Skill is your ability to perform a movement under X amount of load, right? So when we say, okay, I want to get super strong, well, you got to define what strong means to you. And I know it sounds really annoying to ask that question, but you have to, because it's what does that mean to be strong, right? Well, I want to get really, really strong in the squat. Okay, cool. Now we have something to work with, because strength is specific. And one of the principles of building strength is specificity, meaning in order to get better at something, you have to do that something. It's pretty simple, right? Now, in order for you to actually get strong, you have to stress the body. You have to give your body a reason to get stronger. This is where this idea of lifting heavy comes from, right? In order for me to be able to lift heavy, I have to start lifting heavy, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
What this is akin to is what we call like neural adaptation. So your central nervous system. So it's one thing for your muscle tissue to get big and you to build size, and you're training, you're placing tons of tension on the muscle, and so you're giving it a reason to grow. It's a whole nother thing to get your body to activate all of itself to produce maximum amounts of force under load in a movement. Those are two totally different things. That's why, for example, like a bodybuilder who can squat 225 for 50 reps and has massive legs may not be able to take 500 pounds for a single or 700 pounds for a single, even though he has so much more muscle and can do so much more volume than a skinny, natural power lifter, right? But that's why that exists, because a power lifter's specialty is their ability to produce maximum amounts of force for one repetition in a specific movement. That's like specialized strength. And so when you're talking about the context of strength, it involves all of these things. So your original question was like, essentially like the difference, or when does form come in? Is that right? Or like, how do you
balance it? How do you, cause I know it, like a few of my friends started off in powerlifting in college, and I saw in the pursuit of trying to get stronger, trying to get better at a specific lift, whether it was the bench, squat, they'd get injuries trying to go too fast at something, not having the greatest form, not even paying attention to form sometimes. Okay. So how do you balance trying to get that weight up with making sure you have good form as well?
Yeah. So following that, in order for you to get really, really good at something, like I said before, you have to do that something. So when you're trying to become like a strength athlete or a power lifter, you do have to practice technique. Yeah. And technique is something where it's a balance between efficiency and effectiveness. So like you need to be able to be super, super strong, but you need to be super efficient as well. So, like the difference would be like, okay, can I drive in a straight line from New York to California? That would be super efficient, right? But 9 times out of 10, you can't, right? It's not possible. Okay, so what's the next best option? That's being efficient. Having a car that can handle the trip is effective, right? Because if you're on a bicycle, chances are you're not going to be that effective, right? Because remember, the whole goal was to go from New York to California. So that's the difference. Your job as an athlete is to essentially develop both, and that's what technique is. So technique is going to be different for everyone. There are general principles, things like bracing and stuff, staying over your center line, things like that are relatively general. You kind of have to abide by, and you naturally will abide by them, again, naturally. But there are so many unique differences because we are so different as humans that technique is something you're going to develop over time. Yeah. The key part is that you're smart about it. So like if you go way too heavy, too fast, especially as a beginner, yeah, you'll probably get hurt, right? Because you haven't practiced the skill yet enough. You haven't developed your technique yet enough. On the flip side, if all you ever do is go super, super light and only lift it with perfect form, you'll never stress that technique and you'll never do enough to grow. And so you'll never really make progress, right? You may never get hurt, but you never really make progress. And the whole reason why you started was to make progress. So the two kind of happen in tandem. You just have to be aware of them, and they do coincide with one another. Like I said, strength is specific. So if you wanted to get super strong at the back squat, you're going to continue to refine your form and technique so that you can be efficient and effective while making progress. And again, it is kind of like a lifelong journey. But does that make sense? It's kind of like this combination of everything that comes together. It's not really like one or the other. Yeah. Usually people who get hurt or who have really, really bad form, they haven't taken the time to develop good technique and learn their bodies. Or honestly, like one thing that I really recommend for people if they're super new to the gym, super new to powerlifting movements, don't touch a barbell just yet. Get on machines that are compound movements. So compound is multi-joint. So anything that could be a machine, it could be a cable, it could be dumbbell, it could be anything, but it's multi-joint. Do compound movements that are relatively fixed. So like a leg press would be a good example, right? On a leg press, it's a compound movement. You're using a lot of your body. You can load it up so you can feel more weight. You can progress it easier, but it's fixed. So it doesn't require as high of like a technique level, let's call it. I don't know what to call it, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So it doesn't require as much technique. So because of that, it's safer, right? Now, what you can do is you're practicing your ability to use your legs, your whole lower body, get your whole body engaged. You can still brace on a leg press in a more safe way. Then you can progress to a back squat. And that's kind of like how I would recommend most people to break it down, because not only does that give you a pretty good, safe progression to go from zero to something, but you'll also build tissue doing that. Like you'll build muscle doing that, which will give you the foundation you need to be strong in the back squat, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, that was like a long-winded response.
No, I love it. It was honestly, everything you said was very important. So I prefer it to be long, what you consider long-winded, but everything you said was very important to know. I feel like if you left something out, it would have almost left me like clueless, but I understood it and it was really cool. But I wanted to ask you, because for me, I've never stepped in a powerlifting meet. What's that feeling like to go to your first meet? I could only imagine. I love the competitive scene. Like you said, I used to do a ton of sports, football, basketball, baseball. So I love competition in general. But what's the feeling like stepping into a gym, competing against others? Just what's it feel like, dude? It's electric. I love competition. I want to know what it feels like to step into that.
I think everyone who's willing and able should definitely compete in a powerlifting meet. It's really not as taboo as I think like the general population sees it. It's gotten much better. But in short, most local meets are run out of like a gym, right? So it's not like it's going to be in this hotel conference room or some stadium or something like that. Most local meets will be held at a local gym, and they're usually like a private gym, so like a specialty gym, right? And specialty gyms usually serve like bodybuilders, powerlifters, Olympic weightlifters, anybody who's, again, you would consider to be like a specialized athlete, so to speak. Somebody who can't really do stuff at like a commercial gym, right? They need competition equipment, they need certain things, they need to be able to use chalk, that sort of thing. So that's usually where it's held. The meets are usually, the way it runs is you have flights, and flights are like 8 to 14 people in a flight. So like, let's say 40 people sign up for the meet. You're not all going to be in like the same session, we'll call it. You're only going to have about 14 people max, I think it's 14, in your session. Okay, so the way it would work is it's by weight class, and essentially when you start, the person with we'll say like the lightest weight that they're going to be lifting starts first. The person who's the heaviest, meaning the weight that they're going to load on the bar, the person who's the heaviest is basically going to go last. That's essentially how it goes. And you kind of just go in order. And it's 3 attempts on squat, bench, and deadlift. Again, there are certain standards you need to meet. There's going to be 3 referees, 1 in front of you, 2 on the sides. So an example might be like for squats, you have to hit depth. You have to lock out your knees at the top, that sort of thing. You get commands, so you can't really start until the referee tells you to start, that sort of thing. So all those kind of like, the rules and regulations and stuff. But outside of that, dude, it's literally just lifting weights. So you'll have usually I would recommend you have a handler, but you have a bunch of people there in the warm-up room who are all going to be training, lifting / helping. And then it's just a matter of stepping onto the platform, getting onto the bar, lifting the weight, re-racking it, and going right back to the warm-up room. And you do that for the day. And that's basically it. So it's literally just kind of like lifting weights. It's exactly what you would do in training, essentially, but on a platform. Every gym is a little bit different. Every meet runs a little bit differently, but it's really not too different from your training, honestly. The only difference is, of course, the order of things. You know, you're only going to take 9 attempts. In terms of like the flow of everything, you'll weigh in usually 2 hours before your competition if it's like a drug-tested meet. And then you'll, depending on the federation, and then you'll warm up, you know, and then after you're done warming up, you'll go lift. And then between attempts, you can eat, you can drink stuff, you can pretty much do whatever you want. You can talk to people, you can listen to music, whatever you want to do. And then once the meet's over, you'll see kind of like where you ended up. So yeah, it's really simple. Like it's not as crazy and taboo and complicated as some people make it out to be.
Interesting, because my next question was actually going to be, have you ever been intimidated, like going into a meet or during a meet?
Yeah, dude, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of times when I've been nervous, when I wasn't sure how things were going to go. There's been a lot of times too when I wasn't intimidated, but I was afraid, you know, and it's mainly because as you excel at something, you start to care more and more about the outcome. And you work so hard for certain things, right? And so the pressure is on now because it's not just a matter of, can I do this? It's a matter of what happens if I can't, you know, and it's the cost associated with that. And that's once I hit that point in my career, which I would say was probably 2021, my first world championship, and that was in Sweden. Going into that meet was the first time I felt fear going into the meet because I had a lot riding on it. You know, this was a junior world championship. It was peak COVID. Most people wouldn't travel down the road to the grocery store, let alone across the world to go compete, right? And that's what I did. I traveled alone. I was competing. It was my first time truly out of the country. A lot riding on it. Every reason why I got into powerlifting revolved around becoming a world champion. This was my first opportunity to do so. So that was the first time I felt fear. And we ended up doing it. We ended up securing it. We won the world championship. We also secured a world record there, and then we won a best lifter award and stuff. So we did really good. We did really well. But you wouldn't be human, I don't think, if you weren't intimidated in some way or felt some sort of fear. The difference is it's kind of like what we said before, where that energy didn't just come from somewhere, right? It wasn't just created. It was there. And it was transferred. And so now you have the ability to transfer it again and turn it into something, channel it into something. And that's kind of like what I recommend, you know, people do. And it's, again, we also mentioned this, look at the evidence, you know, like this is the beautiful thing about powerlifting and why I think everybody should do it. You ultimately are competing against yourself. And people like to give this bullshit about like, well, there's a game, there's a strategy. At the high level, yeah, I guess there is. But bro, at the end of the day, you're only as strong as you are. Like you are going to do what you are capable of doing, period. If somebody's stronger than you or better than you in some way, let's say they can just be more consistent as a lifter, they don't ever get bad depth calls or they don't rush their bench pauses and stuff like that. Sure. At the end of the day, you can only do what you can do. Now, I believe if I do my best, I am unstoppable and no one's coming close. That's what I believe. But mind you, my hardest opponent that I'll ever face is going to be myself. So that's a hard battle for me to win. But if I win it, I will beat everyone. And that's my mindset. But that's why I think everyone should do it, because powerlifting is so unique where your training is exactly what your performance is going to be if you want it to be. You know, if you train to the standard at which you will compete, you've basically done a bunch of competitions in the training area. You know what I mean? Like that. And so that's what's really cool about it. So again, I'm yapping a lot, but basically, yes, I felt the fear of it, but I don't think you'd be human if you didn't. And I think it's a matter of what you do with that. You know, that matters more than the fact that you feel it.
I wanted to ask you, what's that feeling like achieving pretty much your dreams, your goals? Because at least for me, my goal for so long was hit 500 subs on YouTube. And I've talked about this on previous episodes. When I hit it, yes, I was excited. Yes, I was hyped up. But then I felt like, what's next? What's my next goal? So what's the feeling like winning the world title? Did you want more? Did you feel super happy and then down? What'd you feel?
One of the first real rock bottoms of my life was actually when I won. And so, like I said before, big meet, first real opportunity to do what I had set out to as an athlete. Truthfully, I did rise through the ranks way faster than most people do in the sport. It only took me about 2 years to get to that point. And so there was a lot that I had accomplished up until that point, right? And I remember getting back to the hotel after I had done it, and I felt the emptiest I had ever felt. I felt really alone. I felt super cold, super empty. And what's weird is not only did I accomplish it, but like my parents were calling me, congratulating me. Like I had people around me who cared. Like it's not like, you know, I truly was, you know, this isolated individual with nothing and no one. You know, that's not what the reality was, but yet I felt that way. And truthfully, that was when I realized that the titles don't mean anything and all of it's bullshit. Like and there will always be what's next. And what's actually one of the things that has always been something I've struggled with is no performance will ever be perfect. And in your mind, you're always chasing that, because as somebody who has ambition, as somebody who has drive, who is a visionary, you see things for what they could be, and you'll always envision something near perfect. And reality doesn't really work that way. And so, like I said, there will never be a performance that is perfect. So even in that moment, I was thinking about all the things I had done wrong, all the things that I fucked up on, all the things that could have and should have been better.
Wow.
And again, like most people would look at that situation and be like, dude, just shut up, man. Just be grateful for what you have. But it's impossible because you're there, because you did it. You were in it. You knew. And again, you put in the work. So you have this expectation of the reward you should receive as a result of that work. But that's not really how winning is. And that's not how life is in general. And so that was really difficult to deal with. And essentially my whole life changed after that when I came back. Like everything changed. I was in a relationship, a 10-year relationship at that time. And I knew that relationship was unhealthy and it needed to end. And truthfully, I just didn't have the balls to do it until that moment hit when I came back from Sweden. And that was a huge change in my life. Then everything I did with my business, everything I did with powerlifting, everything kind of just changed, and my whole outlook changed, my whole perspective changed, and I kind of dug myself out of that. And I've had a couple moments like that since then, but every single time it's happened, my baseline has kind of raised as a result of it. So the beauty, I think, in it is that it's an opportunity for you to grow if you see it that way. But yeah, man, like that moment was actually really empty. And so like moving forward, my disappointment in a loss isn't because I give a shit about the title. Again, it's about the work I've put in and having what I feel is an adequate reward for the work that I've put in. And it's almost like a proof to myself that I am who I say I am, right? And so that's where my frustration might come from if I don't achieve something now. Whereas before it was more so like, well, I just need this. I need to become this world champion. Like, this is the title I need. You know what I mean? Whereas now I realize like, bro, like nobody gives a fuck about that. Like that will come and go, you know? And I think your legacy is the story. But, and I've said this before, nobody likes to read a story about a knight who never had to slay a dragon. But the other thing is, nobody really wants to read a story about a knight who tried to slay the dragon and died 5 million times doing so and never actually slayed the dragon. The knight has to slay the dragon. And that's the journey I'm on right now, is I will keep trying and keep coming, but at some point I have to slay the dragon. So it's not even about getting the treasure that's behind it. It's just slaying the dragon, right? And so that's what I've kind of realized as a result of that.
I might have to use that quote more in my life, just because I was laughing a little bit in the beginning, just because like how much I could relate to it. I find it so funny, that feeling of like emptiness. Like I expected so much once I hit certain goals in my life, let's say with the YouTube 500. And then once I hit that mark, like I just, like you said, I felt alone. I felt nothing, honestly. My friends were calling me to hype me up because they know how hard I've been working to get to there. My parents were happy for me. I became a YouTube partner, which was sick, but I literally felt nothing. And I told two of my buddies this, like, they're like, how do you feel nothing? I was just so confused in the moment. It's like I worked pretty much this whole previous year on getting to that point, and then once I got to it, there was nothing. And it's just so weird to even talk about it now. Like,
yeah. Well, and dude, what's crazy is that like whether you win or lose, hit the 500 or not, next day is day one anyway, right? Like you're right back to work. Like nothing changes.
Yeah.
Nothing in your life fucking changes. And that's I think is really where the depression settles in, because you think that this is what's going to solve all your problems. This is what you truly want. But then nothing changes outside of the fact that you've accomplished something. And it's like, oh, okay, so yeah, so now what, you know? And all right, well, I guess I'm right back to what I was doing before, man. That sucks. I thought there was like some like golden gates that were going to open up, you know what I mean? But yeah, man. But that's why too, I think like the journey, kind of like what we were talking about before, the journey is so important to become in pursuit of the outcome, because that's the one thing that when you do accomplish something, or even if you don't, the progress of yourself will always be there, you know? And that's something that like, that creates your legacy. You know, I think if anything, just the accolades and the accomplishments are some version of proof that you've been doing what it is that you said you were going to do. You know, but yeah, man, dude, 500 subs is great, dude. Where are you at now?
640, 645.
Oh man.
Yeah. And honestly,
flying.
It's crazy. 2 months ago, I was at 130. So it happened within the span of like a few weeks. I just flew up, which was insane to me. So it was like, I feel like it happened way too quick for me to even take it in. But now, I'm just really enjoying the journey. Like you said, I'm really just focused on building and developing my own flow to everything, and just continuing on getting better with every video. Because one thing is, I really don't want to disappoint anybody. And I know I kind of disappointed my fans, and I took like 2 weeks off, but it was just because after I hit that 500 point, I was just like unmotivated. And it comes back to a question I want to ask you next. How do you differentiate between motivation and discipline? And now I'm at the point where even if I'm unmotivated at any point in my life, whether it's the gym, whether it's relationships, whether it's my podcast, I have to stay disciplined. Like now I'm getting on backlogs of videos. Like I'm sitting on 3 videos I haven't posted yet, but that's because I put the work in to go find my guests, put the work in to edit them, put the work in to have that backlog, instead of hitting a number, feeling defeated and not having any more to go for it. You know what I mean? Now I put myself in a situation where I just need to continue having conversations, need to continue recording episodes, need to continue putting out content, because I know with the content I want to put out, at least like I want to try to add value into the world and hopefully help out somebody who's not feeling motivated, not feeling disciplined, and be able to listen to the episode and take something home to change their life for the better.
Yeah. Well, what I think you've described is you found a love for the process, like a love for the grind, you know? And that motherfucker's going to win 10 times out of 10 times. Like, the reality is, I know people who live for the outcome. I know powerlifters do, and they come and go, you know, but the people who are just a threat over and over and over again are the people who they don't do it for the gold medal. They could not care less. It's for the love of the game. They want to compete. They want to get sharper. They want to grind. Like, give it to me because I want it. You know what I mean? That's me. Like, I'm one of those people. And I think it's a struggle, it's a battle, but when you commit to something, I think of it as like signing a contract with your vision and your goal, right? You sign a contract, so nobody owes you anything. The goal doesn't owe you shit. Winning doesn't owe you anything. Nobody owes you anything. That's the contract you sign. Nonetheless, you have still chosen voluntarily to commit yourself to this and make the sacrifices necessary, put in the work necessary, right? So you can't bitch and moan and complain about it. There's no giving up. That you don't have that option. You signed the contract. And so to me, it's a matter of loving the grit, loving the grind, loving the process. Again, it's who you become in pursuit of the outcome. The outcome is basically irrelevant. And I do believe that by nature, all these things will come to you as you grow, as an individual and as an athlete, right? Like the type of guy who goes from broke to finally figuring out how to manage his money to, okay, I'm more disciplined with my money, but now let me figure out how to bring in money. Let me figure out how to keep my money, right? Now, all of a sudden, over 5 years, as that person has been going through that process of self-development and learning and growing, he's no longer broke. What did he have to no longer be broke for that to happen? No, it was the other way around. And so you fall in love with this process and that grind and that grit. And that's something that, like, truthfully, like, you can't teach. And it's not to say that it's not innate. It is innate. Every single person has that ability. Chances are, though, if you don't feel it, it's because you're just you're on the wrong path. You know what I mean? You're not aligned. And when you are aligned, no matter what you do, that mindset and that drive it will be copy and pasted into everything. You know, you just have to be aligned. You have to be aligned with the vision and the purpose. That's why it's a contract that you and you alone can sign. But yeah, I mean, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like you fell in love with that grind and that grit and that process.
Definitely, because even in the beginning, I hated editing. And it's not to say that I still don't get annoyed sometimes when I have to edit for hours on end, but I don't hate it anymore. And now I understand editing is part of the process, and it's something we talked about earlier, where I'm the type of person where I want to learn everything, do everything myself. So down the line, if I need to get an editor to free up some more time to work on the business, I want to tell the editor what to do specifically. Like, I want to know how to tell the editor, this intro needs to jump up at this second, this cut needs to happen at this second, because I've just done it time and time again, and I know the flow to my podcast. That's but that could also be an issue, because like we said earlier, it could just be such a time constraint, and not sharing the duties could really be detrimental to your overall business.
Yeah.
Because we spoke about it again, and it was that we're kind of trying to build two businesses at once, and we put a lot of pressures on ourselves. I feel like I'm just laughing in my own head, because everything we speak about just keeps connecting back to something we said earlier, which is really cool. Yeah. I guess that's just how life is. Like, as you continue to grow, you realize all the lessons you learned earlier on in life, and even through your own journey, just start to connect and start to build upon each other. And that's why it's so important to continue building good habits, building good routines, building good systems, like you said, because over time, you'll really see the effects of it. It's the small wins daily that truly do add up.
Yeah. Well, and the way that I try and look at it too is I've become loyal to the ideal, not to myself and not to the outcome. So like, I'm going to create the ideal version of what my life might look like, what Gavin could be, right? And what the outcome could be, all of that. That all gets packaged into like one thing, and that's the ideal. That's what I'm loyal to. So even for myself, like, I'm not here for myself. I'm here for that. Yeah. So when it comes down to something like a decision of delegation, right? It's like, well, do I love myself or do I love this thing that I've committed myself to, right? Because if it's not about me, then this should be no problem. And it's also this sense of like, well, let me put my ego to the side and recognize that maybe I can't do everything. Maybe I can't be good at everything. Maybe I'm not supposed to, right? Yeah. Maybe I should acknowledge that this person who's been doing this for X amount of time and has a proven track record, maybe I should be able to trust them with this. And if I can't, what does that say about me, right? And so that's how I've always, and dude, in the world of powerlifting especially, I can break it down. It's like a lot of people feel like they need to be super, super loyal to their coaches and to their handlers and to like all these people that are involved in that process. And my perspective has always been unique in that. Maybe I'm wrong about it, you know, I definitely could be. My thought process has always been, well, I need to be loyal to the goal, which is this ideal, right? It's not necessarily even just becoming a world champion. It's just this ideal, right? And I owe it to myself because I'm the one who signed the fucking contract to be loyal to that. It's not about me. It's not about what I want. Dude, I'd get coached by a blade of grass if it meant I would get stronger, right? Yeah. It's not about me and what I want. It's about what's necessary and what's true. And sometimes that means having hard conversations. I've made tons of mistakes. I've been a jerk before. People have made mistakes that have hurt me. People have been a jerk to me. That's life. That happens. But you have to operate from this perspective of I'm going to be loyal to the ideal, right? And it would be the same thing like from a Christian perspective, like how we view marriage, right? Yeah. It's like you have to be loyal to the ideal, right? It's not even about your partner anymore. Like that, because here's the thing, when you're loyal to the ideal, you will be loyal to your partner, right? And that's like that hierarchical like worship perspective, right? And that's why kind of God has to be the center. But yeah, so it's like that.
I'm so sorry to cut you off. I need to pee.
No, dude, you're totally fine. You're totally fine.
I want to jump right back into that point because I think it was actually super important because you were talking about the hierarchy of marriage and just sticking with marriage and understanding where it comes from prior to just jumping into it. Because that's also one thing I've had to take a step back in my life and realize is I want to be a person when I do get to the point where I get married, I want to be a person who's a provider, who's able to provide for the whole family. Whether that means financially, which is one way I want to provide, but also mentally, physically. Like if my wife needs a fence put up, I'm not calling anybody to put up. If I have the money, you know what I mean, and I don't have the time, maybe I'll call it, but I want to know how to do everything. So when I have kids, I could teach them how to be handy. Because one great thing that I feel my dad taught me just in life was how to do it all on my own. If I need an oil change, if I need my brakes off, if I need to do certain things in life, I know how to do it. I mean, you see this room, we built that wall ourselves. We connected all these wires ourselves. We ran everything. There's wires running through the ceiling. There's sheetrock up because of us. And it's so funny because to me, it's just regular. Like if somebody were to ask me to do it, I'd be like, heck yeah. But when I speak to some of my friends and when I speak to just people in general, I realize they don't know how to do that because they never had the opportunity to do that. So just going back to the basis of, I want to go back to the marriage thing. I just want to make sure prior to me going into the marriage, I have my life in check before I bring somebody else into my life. Because that's an issue I was running into where I say I want to do this. I say I want to have a great relationship. I say I want to get married, but maybe my actions weren't fully following that. And then now I haven't spoken to any girls. My friends know this. I haven't spoken to any girls or gone on any dates in a while just because I wanted to make sure I'm the person I'm talking about through my actions. And that took a little time to change because a lot of people say they want to get married, say they want to have a great relationship. But then I see it when I FaceTime my friends and they show me their Instagram, their search page is filled up with a bunch of like just trash, like big booty girls everywhere, this and that. Like how could you be loyal to one person if your mind just always viewing the trash? So it's just something I want to align my actions in my life with the life I actually want to live.
Yeah. Well, and it opens the door, like that's what opens the door for sin, and it is hard, but it's the choice you have to make, and it's the choice you're called to make. And like kind of going back to what you were talking about before, asking about like discipline versus motivation. That's what it is though, right? It's like, again, there's no such thing as motivation. Like you're loyal to the ideal. And so the discipline it basically necessitates discipline because the discipline is the only thing that's going to allow you to stay loyal to the ideal, if that makes sense. Because like the feelings come and go. We already know that sometimes our judgments about things are wrong, right? So you have to stay disciplined. And I think as long as you operate from a core set of values, again, those rules that we talked about before, the things that you set up for yourself, but then also to the core values that make up who you truly are, the things you will live and die on, right? Like the things that I believe should really kind of come from like Christ. That's the stuff that creates the core curriculum of who you are. As long as that's where you're operating from, even if you fuck up, even if you stumble and you fall, that's okay. Like you're not asked, nobody's asking you to be perfect, but what matters is that you're disciplined in your intention to do good and to be good as you align with your core values. And that I think too is like, it's just really hard. Like it's really hard to maintain, but that's why you need to find people, again, kind of like sticking to that context of marriage, but it'd be the same thing for a coach. It'd be the same thing for anybody that you bring onto your team business wise. People need to be aligned. They have to be aligned. You need to share the values. And that can be really difficult, but it's so necessary because not only do you kind of become like the people in your circle, for better or for worse, but you can also inspire and lead them. At the same time, you're all a representation of each other. And so if you're going to get in a boat with somebody, you need to make sure you're both headed in the same direction. Otherwise, it's going to be a mess, and that's, I think that's really, it's much easier said than done, but that is really, really important. And again, sometimes that does lead to some really tough conversations, whether it's in an intimate relationship or your coach or a business partner. Like I've had plenty of situations where business wise, it's just like, bro, we just don't align. Like this is just not how I want to do things. Even if I'm wrong, I accept the loss here. Like we can't do this. With coaches, I've had tough conversations where again, I may have been in the wrong, honestly, but I just knew like, we just don't align. Like you're not for me. I need somebody who's for, again, it goes back to that. I can't eat with you if I know that you won't starve with me, and it's like that. And so I think when you operate from that perspective, it gives you a clear set of rules to follow as you navigate that. But if you don't have that, then you're kind of lost,
Yeah, it's pretty cool because what I'm hearing is, as well as you're not afraid to fail. You understand that failure is part of the process. Like you're never going to succeed in anything without failure. The people like Jeff Bezos, the people that have succeeded highly in this world have failed 10x the amount of times the regular person has failed, you know? So being able to go through those failures and being able to pick yourself up out of that gutter is something truly amazing.
Yeah. Well, dude, like, I'm not special. Like, you have no fucking choice, honestly. Like, I'm not even going to pretend like you really have no choice because, like I said, you signed the contract and you know the alternative, right? So it's like, and people, like, it sounds so cool to talk about, like, yeah, like, you're going to fail 100 times more than you'll ever succeed. And like that, like, it's so different to experience that in real time than to just fucking hear it on a podcast. Because when you experience it in real time, what you're really saying is, I'm putting in all of this work, all of this time has gone by, and I'm still not where I need to be. Not only that, but sometimes I feel like I'm even further behind than I was when I started. How is this possible? How do I keep failing? How do I keep falling short? Right? And the reality is, you, like, I hate people who say, like, failure isn't real. Like, no. You failed. You didn't do it. But that's okay, because now this is an opportunity to get back up, learn, improve, and keep going. And again, to me, you don't have any other alternative, especially when you've made the commitment, when you've signed the contract, because the alternative is what? You give up and then you're guaranteed to never achieve it? Who the fuck cares? Like, why would you want to do that? It doesn't make sense. You know, so to me, it's like, well, it's not that special to kind of just keep going, because it's like, I don't have any other alternative. So it's either I die or I end up getting it. And that's it. You know, and I do think, again, when you do commit, and you have to fully, wholeheartedly commit to it, when you do commit, it gets easier, bro. Because like I said, you don't have options. Like, this past national championship was a really frustrating loss for me, because I really felt like I was the most ready I've ever been. I have the strength to be the number one, like all this stuff, right? And to fall short by, again, every single time I've fallen short, it's been by, like, when I tell you, a matter of inches in the game of powerlifting. It's just a matter of it. It could have been a bad, controversial jury call. It could have been, you know, maybe like like this time it was, I almost locked it out, but my quads pushed the bar out on that top end of the pull and we lost it, right? Just little things, right? Comes down to moments. And I was so angry and so frustrated, not at anyone else, but more so at myself. And even in those moments, right, it's like, I absolutely contemplate giving up. I absolutely contemplate picking something else and doing something else. I absolutely have the doubts. I can't speak for anybody else in the sport, but I definitely feel all of that. The question, though, is, what do you do when you feel that, and how do you respond to that? Yeah. What kind of individual are you going to be? And it has nothing to do with anybody else. This isn't like cringy motivation, like you need to be. It's not about that. You can make your choice. For me, I chose to sign the contract. And the contract stated, winning doesn't owe me anything, life doesn't owe me anything, the world doesn't owe me anything. I'm going to do what I've set out to do, period. And that's it. I'm willing to pay the price to do it. And so because I signed that and I do it voluntarily, I have no choice but to keep going. You know what I mean? So once you make that decision, I think it just becomes easy, because it's like, well, yeah, I'm questioning whether or not I should give up, but I don't actually have a choice. I just have to keep going, you know?
Yeah, that last part you said, I think it's so important just for my audience to hear that nobody in this world owes you anything. Winning doesn't owe you anything. The people around you don't owe you anything. And I think it's almost like a life lesson that we all need to come to understand, because for me, it was really hard to understand. I felt when I first started the content, I felt that all my friends, they had to follow me. They had to comment. They had to do this, do that, show support, show love, or they don't love me. But it's not the truth. Like, I didn't start this podcast for, let's say I know 100 people, for my 100 friends to be my audience. I started the podcast to grow way bigger than that. So once I was able to realize that the podcast isn't just the 100 people I know, and it's going to be much larger than that, and as well, the 100 people I do know, they have their own lives to live. They have their own contracts they sign. They don't just have time to go and be my cheerleaders or be my main supporters, you know? So I took that pressure off myself and also off my friends, because I didn't want to look at them any certain type of way because they weren't following me or weren't commenting. Like, I completely understand it now, in the sense of I'm never going to hold a grudge for anybody who doesn't support my journey, because in the end of the day, it's my journey. I'm not owed anything by anybody.
Well, and I'll challenge you. I'll take it a step further. How do I put this? The world doesn't owe you anything, in the sense of, you could do everything right from this podcast perspective. You could on paper have the best fucking podcast in the world and not gain another single subscriber.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's not owed to you.
No.
So that can be very tough to embrace when you're somebody who's walking this type of path and you're carving it for yourself. That's what's scary. The other level to it too is you could die tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like all of this work could technically be for nothing. And that's another scary thought. But it all kind of revolves around this idea again of signing that contract where it's like the risks I'm willing to take for this ideal. And if I'm loyal to this ideal, then I have to, because again, in my mind, and not everybody's like this, and that's totally okay. In my mind, the alternative sucks. Like for me, one of my biggest fears is being average. And so I refuse to allow myself to do that. And so I truthfully think I'd rather just die than just be average. Because to me, if I'm average and I'm not even coming close to living up to my potential, the seed of greatness that was planted within me, like if I'm not even close to growing that, then my life is almost wasted in a way, right? Because really, I don't even feel like I'm impacting people in a positive way. I don't feel like I'm of use to people. And as a man too, there's something there, right? Like you said, I want to provide. I want to be special. I want to be special to the people who are special to me. And in order to do that, I kind of have to be useful, And so if I can't be that, then what am I doing here? And so that's a very extremist approach. And I don't think that that's healthy, but that's kind of how I think. And so again, it just goes right back to that, dude. It's like, you really do have to be willing to let go of what is for what could be. And I do believe that every single person has something that they're willing to do that for. They just need to find that and become aligned with that.
Definitely. And once again, I could completely agree because it wasn't until I started the podcast that I say I signed my contract, because I might have signed my contract in other aspects of my life, but I feel like the podcast what really gave me a purpose, because now my purpose is I know I could grow. I know I could become the biggest. You said it yourself. Like nobody owes me a follow. Nobody owes me a subscriber. But I know through the work I put in and just improving with every episode, whether it's the visuals, whether it's the thumbnails, whether it's the way I speak, I know in the long-term game, like nobody could beat me just because of the type of competition I have in my head. Is that nobody's going to work harder than me. And thankful to the people I've met along the journey. They showed me what true hard work is. Julian being one of them. Like the guy works 7 days a week. I've said this on so many episodes. I was just stunned because I thought I was working hard till I met Julian. Yeah. And I was like, there's levels to this. Yeah. And I need to continue improving and just working harder and going at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's huge too. Like being able to learn from other people in your space. I think it's easier now with social media. You know, like you can... I made a YouTube video once, and one of the things in it was like, comparison is not the thief of joy. It's the Robin Hood. And the idea was comparison doesn't have to be a negative. You can leverage it for a positive. So you can compare yourself to other people and compare, like we were talking about earlier, like your habits and stuff, right? What am I doing that this person's not, and vice versa? And that could be a stepping stone you take to learn more so that you can excel, right? And so you can see someone doing better than you, and the perspective could be like, wow, fuck me, it sucks. Or you can see somebody doing better than you and be like, what are they doing that I'm not doing? Let me figure this out. Let me just ask them, Yeah. And that's how you grow, and that's how you excel. And what you'll find too as you grow is that other people will be doing that with you, right? There'll be somebody starting their podcast and be like, yo, Steve, like, I gotta know, man, like, how did you figure this out? How did you set this up? We've got this sheetrock in our ceiling, but it's kind of ass. Like, we got to figure out how to, you know what I mean? So you almost like pass the baton in a way, but it's all like a perspective. It's a choice you make, So when, like I said, when you're committed to it, it kind of just happens naturally. But that's the beauty of it, like that's the time we live in where everything is so much more accessible. Yeah. Now the downside is I think there's more competition for sure. Things get more saturated, but the benefit is that you have more access.
Yeah. Once again, it's funny you said that because I actually have a clip up on my channel. I sat down with 3 of my friends and we just had a deeper conversation than usual. And one of the clips was comparison is a thief of joy. So I like the way you think about it because perspective is huge in this life, honestly. Yeah. Your perspective on certain situations could be the reason you either fail in that situation or you come out of it thriving.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to ask you, how do you stay so authentic in the content you release? Because one thing I've noticed just through the conversation we had before the camera, on camera, and then seeing your content, you're the same person through and through. I don't see any difference in the sense
for better,
of like,
for worse.
Yeah, you're not trying to be somebody you're not, which is really cool because just being in the content creation space, not anybody I've interviewed per se, but since I produced other shows, I see characters, you know what I mean? And there actually has been, I sat in on an interview where the guy on camera was completely different than off camera. And on camera, he was a savage, like he was saying wild things. And the way people perceive him on the internet. They perceive him to be such a bad person, but it was almost like a character. It was like unauthentic to who he really was, because off camera, nicest guy I've ever met in my life. And I'm just like, I would have never guessed it until I sat down with him. So how do you stay so authentic through your content?
I think, well, one, I appreciate that because I don't always feel like I'm staying authentic. I struggle with that. And two, I don't even know if that's the right answer, because so much of social media is acting in a way, and you are playing a role, you are playing a character. And there's a lot of influencers who do really well and are really successful playing the character. Like the first person that comes to mind is Jake Paul, where he kind of plays the villain, right? And I don't know if I have, I'm not going to lie to you, I think this is the reason. I don't think I have the balls. I don't think I have the balls to portray something that I'm not.
Yeah.
One, I think deep down I would be afraid of what other people think of me, especially if it's not true. Like I think that that's something that's always bothered me, is like, well, I don't mind it if people kind of like know my skeletons or see like my flaws. Like I feel like that's a natural thing. But what I don't want is for people to have this false narrative, this fake perception of what I am, you know, and that, maybe that's a fear that I definitely have to get over for sure. But the other side of it too is it's like, well, I guess there's two things. One is, again, like, I don't know if it's the right answer to play a different character, but I don't even know if I would have the ability to do it, you know, and be confident in doing it, right?
Yeah.
And then the third piece to it too is like, well, if I'm constantly building a personal brand off of something that I'm not and someone that I'm not, then who am I really? So at some point you will lose yourself in that process. And I think that that's a little dangerous because, and this is actually kind of like where the point that I decided, like, no, I'm going to be me. I'm going to be 100% me. I may be certain extreme versions of myself, but I will be 100% me, is when I started to realize the fight game. So Conor McGregor completely fucking blew up, right? Because he brought trash talk to a whole nother level. Why it worked for Conor is because that's literally who he was. And that's when it clicked to me. That's literally who the fuck he was. He wasn't putting on a game. Now, granted, he was saying things that were meant to drum up business, but that's literally who he was. If you saw him in interviews, if you saw him in like the vlogging style stuff, that's who he was. So that's why it worked, because it was authentic. And that's why it reached people. There's a lot of people who talk shit, but nobody hits like Conor, right? And then when you look at like one of my favorite fighters of all time is George St. Pierre. Again, not really much of a trash talker, but just authentic. And so he didn't have to do it the Conor way. He did it his way. So he was authentic. Khabib, same thing. People can say what they want, but authentic. And so that's when it clicked to me. It was like, okay, the answer isn't to play a role, isn't to play a character. The answer is to play me as best as I possibly can. And that's actually a lot harder than I think people realize. So that's why I said before, like, I'm grateful that you said that, because I do struggle with that. And that's conversations I've had with Jimmy. That's conversations I've had with people who are in this game. I'm like, you know, dude, like, how do you, because you think about yourself, like, I'm not that interesting. Like, what do I have to offer, right? But you realize that if you are inauthentic, people will see it. It's fake, and you have to uphold that. And that's very difficult to do. So I think like one of the, again, just to kind of like bring this into full circle, like context, one of the reasons why I'm able to stay authentic is because I don't totally know how to play a different character, if that makes sense, or maybe am afraid to or whatever. But I think the other side of it too is that I think it kind of just comes natural to me in the sense of I can't help but be how I am. And I do have a very passionate personality. And so like something that a lot of people say is like, I tend to be very like cringy and like motivational and stuff like that. And I have like a podcast style voice where like I can only speak as if I'm like on a podcast. And like, I totally get that. But what I've also heard is that one of my gifts is my ability to speak into people. You know, like really breathe life into people, especially like their dreams, and help them find that self-belief that they need. Right. And that's who I am. So if this is how I talk, like this is how I fucking talk. You know what I mean? And this is just how I am. And so it comes naturally to me to speak to people in that way, because that's who I am and that's how I am. And so one of the tricks that you can do is to let go. Like you got to be able to let go and just let things flow. So like if you were in acting, anybody who's trying super, super hard to play a certain role probably isn't playing it well. The best actors are the ones who become the character. They don't play the character, right? And so it's kind of like that. So if you just step into yourself, that means like let go of all the bullshit. Just allow yourself to be who you are. then everything should flow naturally. And I think as long as you stay true to who you are, like those core values we were talking about, as long as you stay true to who you are, people will know that it is authentic. Because at the end of the day, like if I talk shit on here and I'm like, well, yeah, dude, I carry this, and it's like I now have to live up to that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm painting a picture of myself that may not be true. And so it's a little bit easier to live the life of somebody who I actually am than somebody who I'm not.
Definitely. How do you balance sharing personal aspects of your life and maintaining privacy?
I don't know if I have a way, honestly. I think that like the way that I do things now is I try to anything like family stuff I usually don't include, because the way that I see it is social media social media is kind of like a business. So for me, you have these brand pillars and these core values that you stick to that wrap around your content, essentially. Like these are the boundaries, these are the walls, right? This is what your content is. Anything that falls outside of that doesn't necessarily belong. And so like a good example would be like a couples content. Like on TikTok, couples content is super huge, right? It does really well, really well. It's really, really entertaining. Those couples aren't really going to start posting like fitness stuff unless it really blends in with whatever couples content they're doing. You see what I mean? So although they're sharing a lot of pieces of their private life, they're still sticking to the confines of their brand pillars, right? What do these people do? What do I expect when I see this brand, when I see this couple? And so it's like that. So you create these brand pillars for yourself that you stick to, that become who you are or what you represent to the public, So it'd be no different than like if you were Nike. What does your brand represent? Your brand doesn't represent McDonald's, right? And eating fast food. It's athletes. And so that's what they put out. So that's what they stick to. And that's basically it. That's kind of like how I make that decision. Anything that falls outside of that, I don't necessarily need to share. There's even like a lot of the business stuff I don't really share. I don't document because to me, it's like, well, it doesn't really fall within my brand. You know what I mean? Like at least this brand that I've put out, so that's kind of how I balance it. I also too, like, I just don't really want too much of my personal life and family and stuff like that out there because that's making a decision for them that they may not be comfortable with, if that makes sense. But yeah, it is hard though today because everybody screams like personal brand, show everything, vlog, it's hard to find that balance.
Yeah, I was just asking honestly from myself because that's a balance I'm trying to find. And with the podcast, one thing I've realized is the views are going to be mainly off the guest. I mean, at least until I grow a little bit more and people get to hear more of my story. So that's why at first I tried to do more vlogs and behind the scenes. But then I also realized like I'm not comfortable with people knowing certain parts of my life. Like prior to me starting the podcast, I haven't posted on any social media for years. So people really don't know anything about me. So that's been like a hurdle I've been trying to go through just in general and see what am I comfortable with sharing? What am I comfortable with not sharing? Because we spoke about it earlier too. Like I want to start vlogging. I want to start traveling more. But then I also know myself like I'm going to start vlogging while I'm traveling, but then I'm not going to feel comfortable in certain scenarios. So I don't know. I guess just with repetitions, just recording certain stuff, I'll see over time.
Brand pillars. And then also too, like you are creating your personal brand, right? So it's like people need to know what they're getting themselves into. And that's part of the reason why they might follow, right? Yeah. And so that's almost like your unique value proposition as well, is what do you offer? What is your brand? So you stay on brand. It's really that simple. And then like the other thing too is you are in control of it to some degree. And you don't owe anybody anything either. You know what I mean? So like some people, as much as they may be crazy about your content and stuff like that, you don't owe them like an insider's look into anything. And that's okay too. You know what I mean? Not everything has to be a reality TV show. So so you have control, but I think the best thing is to just make these like brand pillars and stuff. And then you stick to those things. And honestly, bro, like when you're talking about views, I would start looking at your content from the perspective of topics. Like I think people are a great value asset in the sense of, okay, if I have so-and-so on the show, then this will bring in views because they all fuck with him or fuck with her. Like, yeah, that's great, but it's the topic that really has power, right? Because that's how you reach a broader audience. And that brings in more attention for both parties and makes it worth it. Whereas if you're just focusing on the person, you're just banking on the person saying something interesting or them having a following to bring to you. Whereas if you focus on the topic, and they're bringing insight and value to that topic that they may be, they might be an expert in or something like that, or may have a lot of experience with, whatever. Now you're speaking to an audience that exists outside of the two of you. And that's really helpful too. And then if you do it that way, you don't really need to jeopardize your personal life, private life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's completely true. And even in you just saying that, just thinking about how the podcast has changed in the few episodes I have recorded and done, it's insane to me, because I feel like I'm slowly starting to find my own flow, in the sense of I know what topics I kind of want to go over, and then depending on the guest I have on, we, like, you do powerlifting, so we'll talk about powerlifting a little bit, and then we'll also talk about just life in general, because one thing we spoke about prior to the cameras turning on was I want this to be a show where people could come relate to, in the sense of, how can I be motivated? How could I step up in what I'm doing? Like, maybe what I'm doing is not enough. Maybe I need to hear what this other person is doing in a certain field, because I've had in ranges of entrepreneurs to, I had a police officer who owns a restaurant. I've had all type of guests on, and I think that's so cool, because even last week I had my first female guest on, because I was talking to my little sister, and she's like, you have no girls on. Why am I supposed to listen to this? Like, who's going to So I'm trying to open up and get guests from all walks of life, in the sense. So when you do listen to my podcast, it has a central theme, but you could go to a different episode to find different topics, which is really cool.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like, I love the Diary of a CEO podcast, but I do not go for the guests.
Yeah.
Like, he does a great job of labeling what it is I'm coming to get, right? It's like going to a restaurant, and imagine if the restaurant gave you 0 hints as to the type of food you're going to eat, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, cool. Like, maybe every now and then I'm willing to throw a dart in the dark, but I need to, most of the time, need to know what the fuck I'm getting myself into. And most of the time I'm looking for certain information. And that's the other thing too. So when you're thinking about, okay, what problems do most people face, or at least the people that I'm speaking to through my audience, and how can I solve that? When you come from that perspective, you're now going to be in a much better position to provide more value. And that's where even just everything from the guest selection to the format, to the structure, to the actual questions themselves of the show, of the podcast, all that changes when you come in with that perspective.
What legacy do you want to leave behind in the powerlifting community?
My goal in powerlifting, but in general, has been something similar of what Arnold has done. So growing up, I was always a big fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger, mainly because the dude was an immigrant from Austria, couldn't speak a word of English, somehow managed to become like a 7 or 8 time Mr. Olympia. So in bodybuilding, that's like their world championship in a way. Multi-millionaire, actor, governor. I mean, crazy, right? What this guy has done. And so in my mind, I see him as the person who spearheaded bodybuilding and built it to what it is today. Everything from the spectatorship to the money that's in the sport to the opportunities, everything. That's essentially what I would like to do with powerlifting in every sense of the word. And so a lot of it has to do with growing the sport, providing more opportunities to the sport. But most importantly, I have this like fundamental message of, I believe you can be great. Not only that, I believe you have an obligation to be great, because that seed has been planted within you. That's potential that you have an obligation to see through. Bear your cross, so to speak, right? Take that on. Now, I'm not going to just ask you to do that. I want to lead through action. I want to show you that it's possible and use my journey to inspire you to do that. That's really where I think my legacy, I'm hoping, will come into play and be built. It will be built on the back of my work. And my goal really is to live like a champion. And I think that embodies a very specific set of principles and values. And I don't think a lot of men, especially today, live by that anymore. It's a hard life to lead when you do that. And something I'm still working on. But I do believe it's necessary, and I'm talking about things like honor, integrity, right? Those are things that I think are like lost arts in a way. And especially in Western culture, we don't really talk about it as much. But I think it's really important to bring that back. And there's a way that you can embody that as you compete. And I think that my real goal is to inspire people to be great, but to do so as a champion would, if that makes sense.
Yeah. How do you define success personally and professionally?
I don't think the definition really changes. It's a really tough question because I feel like with enough time we could expand on it a million times and flesh it out. But I think that um, I think that success, true success, is you giving everything you have to a higher aim, and in doing so, progress both from the self, but also inspire others to do the same as well. I think that probably encompasses it. I used to have like this idea of like, well, I have to achieve all these things. And don't get me wrong, I still want all of that. But as we talked about before, even if I had the R8, the 911 Turbo S, the house on the water, that all these things, right? It still probably like really wouldn't be enough. And I know a lot of people who have those things who are not great people or who are missing in other areas, right? And so to me, it's like, well, that means that the definition has to almost have nothing to do with attainment, you know? It has to do with almost like a sense of like an overcoming, you know? And I think that's basically like what Jordan Peterson would say is like voluntary suffering. Yeah. Voluntary self-sacrifice. That's like what success is in a way. And I know it sounds like really dark, but it's actually a really good thing because when you do that, when you take that on, you grow, you elevate, especially when it's for something higher and greater than yourself. And then other people see that and do the same. And that benefits society. That benefits everyone. And you're also seeing your potential through. So I guess that would kind of be it. But like in one sentence, it would be to grow the seed of greatness within me. That would be success.
What sacrifices do you feel you had to make that were vital to be where you are today?
As a powerlifter?
Yeah.
I mean, there's quite a few. It's tough because we have to define sacrifice. Like if something is an involuntary sacrifice, is it still a sacrifice? If it's something that you don't feel like is a sacrifice, is it still a sacrifice? You know, that sort of thing. But to keep it simple, pretty much anything that would subtract from my ability to perform at the highest level. So that means like I don't drink, I don't go out really. I have to make sure that my sleep is on point, my food is on point, my training is on point. There's no such thing as missing sessions. And then everything has to come with that. You know, I sacrifice opportunities to travel. I sacrifice opportunities to see friends and family and that sort of thing, right? My lifestyle choices are way different than somebody who doesn't have to train for this sort of thing. And then financially, tons of sacrifices I've had to make sure that I can be at these competitions. It's a lot of money to travel abroad, get hotels, get the food, like go through the whole thing. And nobody really pays you anything in the sport. So it's really kind of all on your own dime. So a lot of sacrifices there. All around, there's a lot. But truthfully, I don't think it's anything different than what anybody would sacrifice when they're pursuing anything. Even if it's not something you give a shit about or you're passionate about, like just the opportunity cost alone of not doing certain things because you have to do this one thing. Even if it's a 9-to-5 job, let's say, like that's still sacrifices you're making. And we all kind of have to make them. But yeah, I think the greatest sacrifice, the hardest one to make, and this sounds like super kind of weird, honestly, but the greatest sacrifice is who I am right now for who I need to be. And I always find myself encountering that. It's like, okay, I'm not enough right now. And that's a hard truth. Like I'm just not enough. So what about me needs to go to make room for what needs to be here, you know? And that's kind of hard because it's hard to conceptualize, but it's also hard to do, you know? But that's one of the hardest sacrifices. Like I can't really stay the same. Like nothing changes if nothing changes. Yeah. So a lot of times like we think about like the external shit that we have to give up. But for me, the hardest stuff is like the internal stuff. It's like, okay, well, you know what? We're missing weight. We need to start implementing cardio, right? Well, that's a new habit I have to create and embed into my lifestyle, right? Or, okay, you know what? In order for us to be productive in our professional and our training, like we have to start waking up at 4 or 5 in the morning. All right, that's a big lifestyle change. We have to do that, right? So old habits have to die. It's that, you know, and everything on the internal of that. You know, and then that kind of affects the external in a way, whether it's your relationships or anything else that you do in your day-to-day life that create these patterns that you have, you know. But yeah, lots of sacrifices. But, you know, I feel like anybody would have it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like anybody might have those sacrifices, but it's a difference I find in you is that you're you're like jumping into the sacrifices. Like some people might be like, oh heck no, I'm not giving up drinking, I'm going on this vacation. But people who are willing to stay disciplined, like that's the difference.
Yeah.
At least in what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
But I wanted you, do you remember what it felt like in the moment that you know you could reach a world record title? Like,
I don't remember the moment. I always knew that I would and that I could. So it's more so this constant obsession with trying to achieve that state of that ideal, right? And that's the feeling that I'm reminded of more than anything. But to say that there was a time, a specific moment when I felt like, oh yeah, like I could do that. Like I feel like I always could. Like I was an asshole when I was younger, especially. Like dude, I genuinely thought like anything I wanted to do, I could do.
yeah.
Like it would take work, 100%, but I could do it. If I wanted to go into the NBA, if I want that as like a 5'5" on a good day white boy, yeah, I could do it. You know, like that's how delusional I am. And so I think that that's necessary. That's a necessary component of trying to become successful. But yeah, that was, I don't know if there was a specific moment. I will say that the day that I decided to get into powerlifting, that night that I described when I had transferred, I had went to the gym, was tired of being tired, sat in my car and committed myself to becoming a world champion. Maybe in that moment, because I had seen the world records and I was like, you know what? I could do this 100%. Let's do it. So maybe in that moment, but overall, dude, like I kind of have always felt like, yeah, this is totally possible.
It's funny that you said delusional because it's something I spoke about. I was invited onto a podcast and I said in this game of being an entrepreneur or going after something larger in life, you have to be delusional because you're almost putting yourself in a position that you've never reached before, you know? If let's say for my podcast, like I have to be delusional in the sense that this is going to work. This is all I want to do for the future and I'm going to be great at it. Cuz like I said, my first episode was shit. And I laugh at it because if I wasn't delusional and believe in that I could be really good at podcasting, I would have stopped maybe at episode 1, maybe at episode 3. Like I would have stopped a long time ago, but just having that delusion, that belief in myself that I know I could improve to the point where I could be great at it. It's something you have to have.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And especially because you have to have so much belief in yourself that nothing else and no one else can stop you from trying, you know, because it will get hard. You know, you will fall. You will face a lot of adversity. So something has to keep you going. And I think you need a core belief that it's possible. You know, that has to stay there.
So would you say the hardest part in breaking that world record was physical or mental?
It's mental. Yeah, the training will do its job. You'll always be trying to find new ways to get better and get stronger. You're constantly going to find yourself hitting plateaus, and that's just the art of it. You know, that's just no matter what you do, you always have to be learning and adapting and growing. But as you get better and better and better, and you approach the elite level, there's a sports psychologist. His name is Dr. David Cook, and he wrote a book called Greatness, a very inspiring book. Definitely recommend people read it. But in it, he says that potential is performance minus interference. And so, in other words, or is it performance? Yeah, that's what it is. Performance equals potential minus interference. So the idea here is that you have the potential to be, let's say, perfect, right? Like you have the potential to hit the world record squat. The problem is that's not the only thing you're dealing with. It's not just your potential. It's not just your actual strength. It's also all the interference that comes into play. And that's why it's potential minus interference. And so your job as an athlete is to mitigate as much of the interference as possible so that you can pretty much just have potential on that other side of the equation so that performance can equal just your potential. It's near impossible to eliminate all of the interference. And interference could be anything from like literal external circumstances to stuff that's in your own head. And 9 times out of 10, it's stuff that's in your own head that stops you. That's where faith has kind of played the biggest role for me. But yeah, minimizing that interference has been huge, and it can be very difficult, but I would say the first 2 or 3 times I attempted the world record and didn't get it were a direct result of my own fear and doubt, for sure. So I had the strength to do it. I just was I was in my own way, you know? And then I learned and I realized, okay, I need to pay attention to this. I need to work on this. And, you know, by the grace of God, was able to kind of get my shit together, so to speak, and make it happen.
That's amazing. And it's just cool to think about it because, I'm really grateful I even have the opportunity to speak to people like you and just hear your story, because once again, it just things I could relate to. Like, it's sometimes the biggest battles are going on in our own head. Like, prior to me ever starting this podcast, prior to me ever reaching out to anybody, I thought, like, why would anybody want to listen to me? You know what I mean? Like, what am I going to add? Why? Like, I was my biggest hater, honestly, and it wasn't until I just started putting the work in and said, you know what I mean? Like, these thoughts could still linger, that's fine, but we're going to put the work in every day. It comes back to what we said, that imposter syndrome. I just started to slowly build up evidence day after day. And now, even though I still might feel that way, like, oh, I'm not a podcaster, this and that, I've already built enough evidence in the episodes I've done and the work I've put in to be like, there's no turning back now.
Yeah.
And now I know what I want, and I'm delusional in what I want. And I really don't see anybody stopping me other than me.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a benefit to having like a fuck it mindset sometimes too. Like I said, you just kind of like let go. Like once you sign the contract, it's like, it's done. There's no looking back. Like I said, there's no other alternative. So even if what I'm saying to myself is true, which is not, but even if it's true, what the fuck does that mean? Like, I still need to do this anyway, right? So you're moving forward regardless. Yeah.
Exactly. I wanted to ask you, what does a recovery day look like for you? Because you go hard all year long, you know.
It's tough. It's evolved. It's evolved, but like my recovery days aren't really like your typical. So like I don't see sports massage therapists. I don't go for like hot yoga or sit in saunas. I don't do any of that. Maybe I should, but I don't really do any of that. Truthfully, my recovery day is more mental than it is physical. I still try and get my cardio in. So we'll do like 41 minutes of just zone 2. So it's like a steady state incline on a treadmill. You know, you're not holding on and just going at a decent walk, you know, a decent pace of a walk to where you're sweating, but you can still maintain a conversation. So that's basically all I do. I have one quote unquote rest day a week. So I train 6 days a week. But recovery is a lot more than just like having a quote unquote an active recovery day. I think that part of recovery is the rest. And some athletes like forget that. So like if you're doing all this shit on your active recovery day, you're not really resting. You know?
Yeah.
And so I try to find a good balance between that. One thing I do want to implement is definitely going for more sports massages, trying to implement more stretching, that sort of thing, because all the training I do just makes me super, super tight and wound up. And just being able to open up more would be really helpful. But yeah, I don't really do that much, dude. Like usually my like recovery days are specifically for rest, and then I'm also spending time with family, getting work done, that sort of thing. So it's not like I have a dedicated routine that I do to kind of like unwind, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you too. How do you prevent injuries? But you said you don't. Do you stretch a lot?
I don't stretch at all.
You're insane.
Yeah, I'm an idiot, honestly. I really should. The problem is that like so much of the research that I've heard about, and I'm an idiot. I really should be reading this stuff myself. But so much of the research I've heard about basically says that like if you are loading a stretched position, which is basically what you're doing during the eccentric of a movement, right? Where you're lengthening the muscle. If you load that, then you're stretching, right? And so you don't necessarily need to sit on a floor for 20 minutes, you know, holding a particular pose. Now, in practice, I don't know if I agree with that. I think that's kind of retarded, right? Because the difference is in the gym, when you're loading it, you're also contracting, right? So you're meeting that eccentric stretch, that loaded eccentric with a concentric. Whereas when you're stretching, let's say yoga and stuff like that, you're completely eliminating the other side of that equation. So the muscle stays lengthened in a way. Now, over time, it will come back. But the idea is that as you stretch and stretch and stretch over time, you're just going to become more limber, more mobile, and just more open. I definitely think it's worth it. And there's plenty of people who have received massive benefits from it. If nothing else, even if it doesn't have any effect on your performance, your mental is really important. And I think it has a great effect on your mental. But yeah, I definitely should be doing that. Honestly, I'm just lazy. I'm lazy.
Yeah.
It sounds crazy. It sounds like we're here talking about discipline and doing that. But I'm just fucking lazy when it comes to stretching, because like my training takes me 2 to 3 hours, plus my cardio is 21 to 41 minutes, plus all the work that I have to do to be able to sit and just stretch for 20 minutes. It's possible. I can't make excuses, but I'm so lazy when it comes to it. So I'm looking into like a sports massage therapist maybe once a week. And then I would like to do some stretching. Honestly, what I'd really like is to buy a sauna, like a traditional sauna. And then I'd feel better, because then when I'm sitting in there, I can stretch. But yeah. Do you stretch?
I recently started stretching a ton more. At least this past year, I tried to implement stretching. I was bad, but this past month I've been forced to start stretching because I have 2 torn meniscus in my knees, and I didn't get surgery. I just went to therapy, got some like stem cell shots in them, and it got better for a little bit. But now I have a lot of issues.
Yeah.
So stretching helps it out a ton. And I recently started lifting legs again because I can't squat. Like if I squat, I'm done for.
Really?
Yeah. Like,
Why? What about your squat? What's wrong with it?
my knees will just feel like they're like. I won't be able to walk tomorrow.
But you can do like leg press, belt squat, hack squat kind of thing?
Yeah, but like very low weight because I just started doing legs again probably like 2-3 weeks ago.
Okay.
But it's also because like meniscus is very, I think it's lateral movement like side to side. Like I play a ton of basketball, so I just saw it as like that's my legs, and then jumping up and down definitely wasn't the best for me. Like trying to go up and dunk on people, like that was just.
Do you have an injury history with your knees?
Yeah, I mean, only the meniscus tear.
Okay.
That's it. And then I think it was because I got cortisol shots, or I think that's what it's called, and it took away the pain for like 6 months, and they told me that's what it was going to do. It's going to like limit the pain for 6 months, but after 6 months I might have to get another one.
Did you do anything to rehab it?
Nah, I went to PT for a while, but honestly I wasn't lifting. Like I should have been lifting while going to PT to build strength in. So I think like my hamstrings, quads, calves, all really weak. So that's what I'm doing now is like I'll go through a little bit of pain, but now I'm starting to do legs 2 times a week and just slowly build up my hamstrings, build up the muscles around it.
Yeah, I will say that I've found you lose what you don't use, which I think some like optimalists would say that that's a myth, but I don't think so. I think it's true.
Yeah.
And so like injury prevention is tough. Injury rehab is tough. Like obviously I don't have a doctorate in physical therapy. I'm not a surgeon or anything like that. But what I have found is that you do need some exposure to the movements and to a stimulus to help basically give your body a reason to get better, right?
Yeah.
If you don't give your body a reason to get better, you're just going to get worse in a way, which sounds very counterintuitive. But any injuries I've had have only been fixed through programming. And by programming, I mean like the actual training that I'm doing. Very few have, I don't think if any of them really have been fixed through like PT. Like I've had like the best PTs in the world, at least in powerlifting, work on me and give me exercise and honestly they all fucking suck. Like they just never worked. And it's nothing against the PTs, it's just what they're taught. But what truly worked was fixing movement patterns and fixing and really just creating changes through the training itself, like the programming. Now you can't be stupid about it. Like you don't want to do movements that are going to cause tons of pain, use tons of load or use the amount of load that would cause tons of pain, that sort of thing. But just slowly over time, progressing. And then like same thing, let's say you have knee pain when you squat. You can start off with a box squat. And if you notice that, okay, I only experience knee pain when I break 90 degrees. Okay, cool. So don't break 90 degrees for the first week or 2 weeks, right? And then slowly keep adding on some load, right? Then you get to a comfortable place where you can do box squats completely pain-free with a reasonable amount of weight. Now bring the weight back down and you can slowly increase the range of motion. So you're just going to bring that box a little bit lower. And a little bit lower and a little bit lower. Before you know it, you're doing a pretty deep squat to a box. Then you're going to take away the box. You see how it's like a slow progression over time? Now, don't get me wrong. If the injury is super severe and you've completely torn something, whatever, there's only so much you can do, right? But most of the time, you can use your programming and the way that you perform certain movements and modify certain things to heal and build yourself back way stronger. And a good example is one of my biggest competitions that I had was the first Sheffield, which is basically a competition where they take like some of the best athletes in the world and they put them all up against each other. So I was invited to that, and I could not tie my shoes without back pain. So I couldn't squat, really. I couldn't do anything. And I had started working with the guy that I'm with now, John Song. I started working with him because he's a full-time physical therapist and he's a great coach. And within 12 weeks, we went from me not being able to tie my shoes without back pain to setting world records and, almost winning the meet. And almost all of that was through the programming. So the training programming you do is really important. How you train essentially.
I could definitely see that because like I said, I just recently started doing legs again. And one of the things, like I warm up with backwards lunges. We had no weights at first. And I remember the first week of me doing it, I did 4 sets of 20 and I was sweating my ass off. I was dying. My knees were hurting. But now me doing 4 sets of 20, I'm like, all right, let me do 6 sets because I don't feel it as much. The only thing will be is now I'm starting to feel it after the workout, which might be I'm just pushing myself a little bit too much. I might need to dial it back. But I see that just through working out my legs and slowly, that's actually the only program I have is for legs, like chest, back, buys, tries, whatever. I just go in, do whatever I feel like doing that day. But with legs, I literally chat GBT'd. All right, I have a torn meniscus. My knee doesn't swell up anymore because when I first tore it, like my knee was a baseball. But now it's to the point where it doesn't swell up. So it's not really like super agitated. I just know that it's the muscles around my knee that need to be strengthened because I took so much time off. I gave myself so many excuses not doing anything.
Yeah.
And then I just woke up one day and I was like, all right, I need to stop being a bitch, honestly.
No, it's a smart decision. I don't know if I could recommend ChatGPT's programming,
yeah,
but it's a start. It's a start.
Yeah.
And like I said, man, I think that's a great place. Like you definitely are saving yourself because later down the line, had you not done that, you would have been so much worse. And to me, like, again, maybe not the best mindset, but how much worse could it get? You know?
Yeah.
So you blow out the knee again, it's like, okay, I'm back to where I was before, but at least now you're doing shit, you know? So again, what is the alternative, right? And so that's kind of how I like to think about a lot of these things. Like I always see, like I hear people say like, oh, well, lifting weights fucks up your joints and blah, blah. There's some misconceptions about that, but let's just say that's true. Okay, well, all the old people I know who don't lift weights, half of them can't get up out of a chair, right? And half of them can't withstand a fall. And I'm not trying to fucking shit on them or like make fun of them because it's a very serious problem, right? But imagine now if you lifted weights and you were able to withstand a fall or you were able to get up out of your chair and do normal things, right? That's a huge plus. The reality is most old people, or most people I should say, let's say past the age of 45, not that 45 is old, but are starting the decline, like their body is starting to decline, right? Most people are experiencing some version of pain, whether they lift or not. So imagine being super jacked and super strong and feeling pain versus not. I mean, if I'm going to feel a pain anyway, and I'm going to have to deal with these aches and stuff like that, I might as well be super jacked and super strong. You know what I mean? So.
I completely agree. That's something I was going through last year where I was we talked about it a bit. I was 160 pounds, like paper thin, had no muscle on me. And now I might be in that same weight range. I'm probably 10 pounds more now. But I got a ton of more muscle. We spoke about it. Like I was scared to bench 25 on each side. Now I'm benching 225 and it's feeling like paperweight. Yeah. And I just feel so much healthier for it, like overall. And it's actually insane to me. Just because I could never see myself backtracking again unless I have like some freak accident where I'm not able to move or do anything. I just see myself from now on always in the gym, always getting stronger because I never want to get to a point in my life where I feel like my own body's given up on itself because I was lazy. Yeah. And because I stopped working.
Push-ups don't cost a penny. So that's kind of like, I think fitness is probably the best way you can transform your life. You know, it's relatively free. And also too, like, again, going back to that obligation, there are people who don't have the ability to use their body in the way that most people can. So you kind of have like a responsibility out of gratitude for what you have to use it. And to see it through, you know, see how far you can go. Do you have to become a competitive athlete necessarily? No, not necessarily. But, you know, would it be good for you to push yourself? Yeah.
Yeah, that last part is definitely something I take personally in the sense of I thought of that so many times when I first didn't want to go to the gym. Like how many people wish they were in my position to be able to go to the gym, to be able to, even if I had a little bit of pain here, whatever pain it was, it doesn't compare to the pain they're going through or the sensation they're not even feeling. And here I am taking it for granted. Like,
and it doesn't invalidate your experience, but it does put things into perspective.
Definitely. And it just goes back to what we were saying. It's all about putting certain things into perspective. Could be like the major difference in certain situations.
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually wanted to cut it there just because it's 2 hours and 15.
Perfect.
This was a beautiful conversation. I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming by again. I really appreciate all the gems you were dropping on this episode. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come by and have a conversation with me.
No, dude. Honestly, man, the honor is mine. The pleasure is mine. I'm really grateful to have been connected. Really happy that I got to be here, share this time with you. And I'm really grateful that you gave me the space to kind of share some of my thoughts and some of my perspectives. So hopefully people got value out of it. But if not, then at the very least, hopefully it was just a fun conversation to listen to. But yeah, man, I look forward to doing this again sometime.
Definitely. Welcome back anytime, brother.
Thank you, man. Thank you.